Profile interview.
Alex Mabunda is my guest. He is CEO and founder of the company Ntiyiso Consulting Group. He's here with me in the studio. I hope that you can join me in this conversation on 011-883-0702 if you know Bra Alex and the work that he does. Bra Alex, good evening to you and thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate you coming to studio, man, especially with the rain and everything happening outside. Really, really appreciate it.
Yeah. It's been a long time coming. I know we had some few postponements. So I'm glad to be here.
Thank you, sir. Tell me, what is Ntiyiso Consulting Group?
Ntiyiso Consulting Group is a management consulting firm based out in Centurion in Pretoria.
Right.
We're 17 years in business. Many people know us for the work that we do in the local government space, revenue management and enhancement. Municipalities are very topical, but we're a big contributor in that space. But we do have two other subsidiaries, one on industrialization consulting, and that's really about, infrastructure development and so forth. And we have business consulting as well. So revenue management, business consulting, and industrialization consulting forms Ntiyiso Consulting.
What does that mean, revenue management? Break it down, brother. Listen, I know I sound clever sometimes. I'm not. What does that mean?
You have it clever.
What does that mean, revenue management?
So in municipalities, part of their business is obviously to provide you with services.
Right.
But you have to pay for those services.
Of course.
And for you to pay for those services...
You need to say that again.
You have to pay for those services.
We'll talk about that principle in a few moments' time,
Yeah, you have to pay for those services.
Yeah.
But, to put up that whole infrastructure, they need to decide the price of the services, otherwise known as tariffs. They need to measure the usage, and that's called metering. And then they need to bill for those services. That's billing. And then they need to present you with a bill, whether they send, the post office or lately digital statements.
Right.
And they need to to provide payment infrastructure. When you go to Pick and Pay, you can pay your bill, or you can go to the municipality or online. And of course, for those people who do not pay, they need to switch you off. That's called credit control.
Right.
And for those people who persistently still owe, even after credit control, they need to recover the debt, and that's debt recovery. So Ntiyiso Consulting offers end-to-end services, advisory as well as operational support across that whole value chain.
So you provide the platforms that manage that process from what's the first phase?
So the first phase is tariffs, which
is
to
billing, right? Even to
billing,
credit control?
to credit control and to debt recovery.
So that whole value chain, you assist certain municipalities to manage?
Absolutely. And that's what truly differentiates us in the market. So what you will find is that, there will be people who will perhaps do billing, but they won't do credit control, or they will do metering and they will not do tariffs, or they will do either of the one and not the other. But we sort of provide the whole value chain end to end, and that's sort of a differentiator.
Are you comfortable to tell me which municipalities you work for?
Yeah, of course. We support pretty much all the metros in Gauteng, maybe with small exceptions here and there. Intermediate and big cities, I think. Among the 8 metros, we're probably saving around 5 at the moment. And then obviously intermediate and smaller cities.
You probably get a lot of flack, I suppose, from disgruntled citizens. You probably get a lot of flack from administrators in those municipalities. You probably get a lot of flack just generally.
Yeah, look, of course, we pretty much in the background. So, when people are not happy with their statements or, being switched off and all of those things that happen, mistakes always happen. Those matters always obviously go to the municipalities themselves, but we're there in the background to support them.
Where does it come from? Where did Ntiyiso Consulting as an idea come from? How those guys in South Africa, black guys your age, would have been wanting to buy a couple of taxis, broer, No, I mean, would you disagree? I mean, most guys who understood themselves as entrepreneurs at a certain time were confined, not through any fault of their own, but to imagining that entrepreneurship was limited to maybe I'll run a general dealer, maybe become a professional, a doctor, a lawyer, maybe a cop, maybe Where did that come from for you? I mean, this is pretty high level stuff.
Yeah, it's 17 years since the business was started,
sure.
And I had the privilege of founding the business, but I do have partners in the business that came from different backgrounds,
sure.
Combined, which eventually gravitated us into this more well-crafted, value proposition. But as for Ntiyiso Consulting itself as a business, so my personal background is that I worked as a business analyst for a multinational company responsible for factory information systems.
What does that mean, bro, Alex? I want to relax, and slow down a little bit. What does that mean? What does it mean that you are a business analyst? What does that mean?
So business analysts or business analysis is a concept that was coined when technology developed to a point where it became, a tool of business.
Right.
And you always had this chasm, where technologists didn't understand business and business didn't understand technology. And you needed aggregators, who understood technology and business. So that's what a business analyst is, really. So it's about systems within the business, but obviously supported by technology.
But that's a whole nother way of thinking, right? I mean, it's a way of thinking that integrates the understanding of systems and technology and how that operates in the practical world. It's a very different way of thinking, and dare I say, the kind of thinking that is going to be needed, I suppose, in the future, because it is a speciality that sort of splices very, very different ways of thinking to create a brand new reality, and that's the efficiency of those organizations who come into understanding how to use technology for the practical business operations.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, that's a totally different way of thinking completely, because how we've been traditionally trained is to specialize in one way of thinking. Again, I ask, where did that come from?
Yeah, so with that work, I eventually decided that, I needed to leave the business that I was working for. And then I started Ntiyiso Consulting, and the first point of call was to provide. So this was a manufacturer. I won't mention names, but I supported the smaller firms that were feeding into this gigantic manufacturer with the same business analysis kind of systems that I was providing the employer with, and that grew. From there, there was a bit of a backstory where prior to that, there was a lot of interest with one of the partners, to create an environment where we could churn out, industrial products, so to speak, by way of leveraging technology, research, FDI, as well as product development to start new industries. And one of our early projects was actually to build a factory that processed sisal. Sisal, it's a plant that produces strings of fiber to make ropes and twines, which is used in the maritime and agricultural sector. So previously there were a lot of these plantations around Limpopo, which we took over because they were abandoned after, there were changes in 1994. And we rekindled them and raised money, and bring them back to life. And so there's an element of, industrial consulting and industrial, and manufacturing concern. But we gravitated more into systems, and later on, which is where we are today, when I introduced, I spoke about our industrialization consulting, I spoke about revenue consulting. So that also is part of the DNA, industrialization, as well as...
Have you thought about going to radio? Because you're an amazing voice. you should think about. You should think about it.
My arguments won't be as cogent as your ones.
Yeah, well, we'll talk about that, and maybe we can partner up somewhere. Alex Mabunda is my guest, Group Chief Executive Officer of Ntiyiso Consulting Group, and we're just talking about his life and times. You grew up in a village called Bungeni in Limpopo province. Tell me about that upbringing.
Yes, I grew up in Bungeni, in Limpopo. I was born there, school there, from standard. What is that?
From sub
A
to Form 5.
To Form 5.
Yeah, because other people don't know what you're talking about.
Yes. And of course, so Bungeni is a village not far from Louis-Trichardt, about 40 kilometers. So up the N1 and then 40 kilometers of Louis-Trichardt. Very cultural. It's got very strong cultural heritage.
Yeah.
So I had the privilege there of growing up as a head boy, looking after goats and then cattle. Went to initiation school there. Contrary to popular belief, we do a lot of that.
Yeah. Do people not believe that people have initiation schools in Bungeni?
I think generally this is associated with the Eastern Cape, but there's a lot of that in Limpopo as well.
Right, of course.
Yeah. So learned many ways, of the elders there, of the traditional way of, and cultural ways, which in a way I think, build one, outlook of the world and reality. And obviously had the privilege of going to Wits University, which was sort of Ivy League kind of university for South Africa, worked for a multinational. And I think all of those experiences combined, form and shape a personality that one has.
Had you always been a studious child? Had you always been, and I don't know how long ago this was, but to have landed up in Wits as a little young man from Bungeni province would have meant that you showed above average academic prowess, right? Had you always been a studious, academically inclined young man, and would the environment that you grew up in, would it have lended itself to that?
I think so. I wasn't necessarily always the greatest. I went to school with one of the partners in the firm, and one of the guys. One of the guys who have also just made it very well in the public sector.
Right.
And all those guys were bright.
Yeah. There's some bright guys out there.
Yes.
It's scary.
So I was thereabout, but not quite. But by my matric class, I became top of class. And it was one of those things that I kept doing better and better as I was growing up. So, I think I'm probably more on the hard work. Someone was telling me that it's either you're very bright or you work very hard. So I work very hard. I'm not nearly any bright.
I resonate with that a lot.
Yeah.
I'm definitely not a bright guy, but I work damn hard, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I resonate with the idea that there are some really bright guys, because you meet with some really bright guys.
Yes.
And then there's us who just slog, just work hard and try to understand what stuff means. I'm still interested in the environment that would have lent itself for a young boy who was becoming a young man to be studious. I imagine that you're of the generation that saw the reality of the Rain of Stones, as we call it sometimes. A time and era when there was a lot of unrest in many of our communities as South Africa was going through political transition. And for many, many very bright guys and hardworking guys during those times, those heady times were very difficult in that very, very, very potentially powerful individuals were sucked up by that whole moment. And I'm interested to understand how your upbringing would have insulated you from that reality, if indeed it did, because I'd like to hear that story. But how were you able to stay the course to the point where you reached Wits University? And very few people would understand what a huge achievement that would have been, to be able to come from Bungeni to, in that context, so that's South Africa's political context, and stay the course. That is a huge, huge achievement. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so maybe I should add at this moment that my old man who died many years ago. In fact, just before I was born, he had a house in Soweto, and my mom went and lived in the house in Soweto. She took a job with the City Council of Johannesburg. So I spent sort of my first 5-6 years living in Soweto with her, and almost every other school holiday. So I had sort of Soweto, city type exposure, blended with your, village, sort of traditional
values.
Yes, absolutely. Strong values. Yeah. And I also happen to come from a royal family. My elder brother is a chief.
Yeah, yes.
So yeah, my eldest brother is a chief of my immediate village. So
wow,
so that also added into.
I haven't been this close to royalty. I gotta tell you that. So it's quite a. I don't know. I feel like bowing or something.
No. I'm not the next in line. So.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So. So I grew up with a lot of exposure to what was going on in the country.
Yeah.
In 1976, I was a year old, and stories go around that I will run and go power, and so I was in that sort of, and of course, this eldest brother, before he took the position, he was also an activist in Soweto. So as early as when I was in Standard 3, we used to get copies of Learn and Teach. They used to be smuggled to us. So I grew up with a lot of political consciousness. And when I was at Wits, I was with a socialist student organization, which was like your ultra-leftist, radical socialist movement. Yeah.
But that's interesting. I mean, from that leftist socialist movement to a capitalist? I mean, would it be fair to call you a capitalist?
Not in that classical sense, but yes, certainly an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
I would say. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah. So I've tested the length and breadth and the height of different ideological outlook, so to speak, and I think that's quite beneficial in understanding the world that we live in, understanding the environment that we live in, and obviously adding into one's imaginative and innovative mind.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think that also gravitated into what we stand for as a business. I mean, our mission is we empower institutions that enable Africa's development. So I might not be throwing stones anymore, but I'm throwing them in a different context. I mean, when we work with municipalities, for example, we mean what we do. It's a very committed and well-meant undertaking to really see local government, change. And that's why you see we do a lot of thought leadership work, because we are continually wanting to rally, society into getting this institution to work.
How do you feel about the political instability at the moment in our municipalities? What immediately comes to your mind when you see that kind of political instability? That obviously impacts on the ability of people to pay, or willingness for people to pay. And I'm harping back to that principle of services need to be paid for. But when you see the kind of instability, political instability that we see, it erodes that kind of willingness to pay and the strength of the argument that services need to be paid for. Because a lot of people feel like they're paying, but they're not getting the services. How does the political situation grab you?
Yeah, so of course the problems that bedevil municipalities are certainly influenced a lot with the politics. But I must say that if I was to attribute, different factors, I would say maybe 30% is politics. 70% is a whole lot of things. I mean, you will know, for example, that, and I always like to use this example, before the extant local government system, you had very small towns.
Yeah.
Benoni City Council, Germiston City Council, and so forth. So much so that, when time to pay for rates came, the guy on the other side of the counter knew each one of you
exactly, yeah,
by first name, right? Then we amalgamated this.
We created these metros,
Yeah, and then, you look at the city of Tshwane, 800,000, right, households or accounts. City of Joburg, over 1 million and so forth. And that necessitated that we implement systems, to deal with issues around billing, revenue and all of those things. So that created the kind of complexity that I think, we paying the school fees of complexity that, will take time to get to a point where, that complexity is turned into simplicity. And part of the value proposition that we provide as a firm is to try and, knock down some of those difficulties around that complexity. So I'll give you an example. When you get a bill that says you owe 1 million rands in water, that's an impossible bill, but those bills have went out to
consumers.
To consumers. Yes, you can argue that maybe wrong people were employed because of politics, but I can tell you it's also because these are complex systems, right? And no one has prior knowledge and experience of.
Are you suggesting that we place perhaps too much of too much importance on the political game? You've just given me a percentage of what you believe politics accounts for in that whole value chain. You say it's about 30%. Do you think that as consumers, as citizenry, perhaps we might not be as informed as we ought to be about what makes up for an efficient municipality?
I think so, because the system is new. The system is new, and I've, for example, as part of our expansion strategy, looked at local government systems in few countries like Namibia, Mozambique, Ghana, Nigeria, and you realize that first of all, I think South Africa we have the most mature local government systems, and thanks to the 25 years odd where we've instituted these systems.
Right.
So yes, it's a school fees era, and add another 10 years, maybe we'll sort of get it right.
Are you optimistic in that way?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Very.
You didn't even flinch. You just agreed that. So that gives me comfort, because I think because we spend so much time looking at the political developments and start believing that the political developments have more power than they actually do in the process of service delivery and the administration thereof, we sometimes lose sight of the reality of the fact that there's a back office that is systems run, right? Not individual run. No? It's not run by individuals with their own whims and those kinds of things. And it gives me comfort to hear that, we're still paying our Kheda fees. Yeah?
Absolutely.
And that we will get to a place where these systems will be so deeply entrenched that they'll become second nature to us, that we won't have to depend on charisma and personalities and that kind of thing. And that's what I love about the agnostic nature of systems. The fact that they are not aligned, but they are run by people. People are aligned. I don't believe in this idea of neutrality, but systems as they are agnostic. They give us that ability of non-alignedness. Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Well, I guess,
I know it's a unfair question to you, because obviously you'll say it's a good thing, but I want to hear it.
Well, I don't think it's a question of whether it's good or bad. It's what we do with that reality, because it is just the reality. It is what it is, right? Systems are systems. They are run by people. People are people. There's a confluence of systems and people. Yeah. And the greater value comes when there's congruence between systems and people. In fact, when we describe our value proposition, we're at pain to show that actually we aggregate the systems and people. So you're not going to run away from that. It is what it is.
It is what it is, yeah.
It's what you do with it. But just a little bit further on the issue of the role of politics, right? If we just zoom into that 30%. So, of course, there are other matters around our politics of the day, right? That municipalities just happen to be a casualty, right? The whole idea of, state machinery and state as a means, of access to resources. I mean, this is not a problem that's unique to municipalities. You see it in government departments in provinces. You see it in government departments in the national, at national level. So municipalities just happen, to be just another sphere of government.
Right.
And maybe because they are localized, the politics seems to be, or tends to be, a bit more hotter, because...
Sure, I mean, that's where the tar hits the road. I mean, this is not just at the policy level. This is where real toilets must flush.
Absolutely. So we tend to think, and I think it's also, sort of the lexicon in the ruling party, that the best minds are deployed to national government. The second best minds are deployed, provincial government, and the other not so great minds are deployed at local level. Yeah. When in fact the hard work is at local level. Sure. Right. So we should be having it other way around. We need skills in that area.
I was having a conversation with a Scandinavian academic, and they said to me that is where we are missing the point. That they push very hard that the best minds are the ones that teach their youngest children. Their best minds teach their youngest children.
Wow.
And I agree with that we tend to get the best minds doing the most uncomplicated work and the most complicated work done perhaps by not our best minds, and not because people don't have the prowess or the potential, but they are not skilled or educated enough to do that. So I agree with you as far as that is concerned. How do we solve that?
Education, conversations like the one that we're having now, and we also as a firm, have a lot of conversations with the likes of National Treasury, trying to educate one another.
What is education?
Well, exchange of information. So, I mean, bureaucrats, for example, sitting in Church Street will not appreciate certain nuances about difficulties that are, happening in local government, inside the municipality. Yeah. And when we begin to have those, cross-pollination of ideas, exchange of information, we begin to formulate better and better, strategies, tactics, interventions. Right. I mean, if I make a case in point, we've had the privilege, for example, of being hired as a firm as cabinet representatives in Mangaung to try and obviously assist with the situation there. Never before has intervention into a municipality take a form of a company, providing resources for that. And the idea is that
is that an admission by the politicians that they don't know what they're doing?
I don't think it's that more than it's them trying to do things that work. I'll give you a perspective around this. So traditionally, if a municipality is failing, the provincial department
puts them under administration.
Will send an individual.
Right.
This guy is flying solo.
Yeah.
Into an organization of 1,000, 2,000, a few thousand people, and obviously they get dribbled, sure. Right? They are bringing their input as an individual.
Yeah, they're unarmed.
They're unarmed, absolutely. It's like going into a war without, So we move people in there. We have systems, right? We can track their performance, but most importantly, we're able to measure the impact that's being made there. And the minute we get a sense that those people are not making the right impact, with the support, of course, that we provide in the back end, we're able to remove those people summarily. But if it's a government deployee, even the process to even get to a decision that such person must be removed is almost impossible, right? Of course, this is a bit experimental in a way, but I have no doubt that in time, we'll see some dividends.
Mangaung is a tragedy, bro. I mean, Mangaung is a travesty and a tragedy. It's sad to drive through Mangaung at the moment, so I'm glad that there's some sort of intervention taking place there. But you go to Makanda, where people can't get water, and a civil society organization like Gift of the Givers has got to be the one that makes the boreholes there so that people can get water. It's a travesty. So I'm hoping that this systems consciousness becomes the reality of the way that we govern, rather than what I think is the reality at the moment, that we are still governed by whims, by sentiments. And I'm looking for a systems consciousness, and maybe you could talk to me a little bit about that is agnostic to whims. What are systems?
Yeah, what a question for radio.
Tell you, these people love this stuff. Listen, I've been doing this a long time. You remember Bernie Mac? I've been black for a long time. I've been doing this stuff for some time now. I now have a sense as to the fact that people might not necessarily understand the technical intricacies of a particular conversation, right? Might not understand the But here's the funny thing that happens when people listen to radio. This is the thing about the theater of the mind, is that stuff that is in their minds that has been lurking there, that hasn't been woken up, starts to get woken up by sounds and words and ideas that they've never heard of before, but start to waken something up in their minds. Trust me, the people that listen to these things are interested in what is a system from this show's perspective.
Yeah. Okay, of course, this won't be an academic answer by any standard. But, systems presuppose rules.
Right.
Right. It presupposes components.
Right.
It presupposes, those components having linkages. Right. And those linkages being governed by those rules. Right? So...
And I would imagine distance, it presupposes distance from agendas that are...
From whims.
From whims.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Yep.
So the rule element says that when this item lands here, it must satisfy that condition and this other condition and that condition, then it moves over, to this other position. If I may just put it that way. So, absolutely, systems is about rules, it's about predictability, right?
Don't you think?
It's about outcomes that are predictable.
Right.
And of course, in modern times, systems, with the development of technology, right, you can automate systems by way of automating the processes that underpin the systems. So, and this is where now you can eliminate the kind of human intervention that may seek to, divert the purpose of our system.
Don't you think that is the gap here? That is the opportunity here that we need to start to colloquialize the principles that underpin systems thinking. In other words, I'm suggesting that many of our conversation, and I'm speaking here as an interlocutor, as a communicator, right, are about so-and-so is a nice person, so-and-so is a bad person, so-and-so is good, so-and-so is bad, right? And so our conversations are always about that kind of thing. We don't have conversations about such and such works, such and such doesn't work. We talk about so-and-so is good, so-and-so is bad. We don't talk about so-and-so works and so-and-so doesn't work. And I want to suggest that it's got something to do with the fact that we haven't yet appreciated that it shouldn't matter whether somebody is good or bad, from whatever perspective. The question should be a more utilitarian one, a more pragmatic one that says, does it work? So I don't care what T-shirt you wear, right? I don't care what your accent sounds like. I don't care what you look like. Does it work? How far are we as a country, as a population, from that kind of thinking? Because I got a feeling it's a major mindset change. How far do you think we are from that?
Yeah. Look, I mean, our dispensation is a product of politics.
Right.
Maybe it's true with, many dispensations. If it was the French Revolution. Right. People were ushered into the post-revolution from a mindset of politics. And politics is charisma, it's personalities.
Whims.
Absolutely, and maybe 28 years or however much, we've been into the system. It's taking a bit of time to shed off, that aspect of our reality. Right. So it's still about, comrade so-and-so. Yep. You go into a meeting, you say certain things, and, everybody
realizes which side of the divide you belong to, right?
Yeah, and they go into an applause, but, can you sit back and reason systems? Right. And I'm glad that you're mentioning this, because it's a very important point to be made, to say we need to consciously, uproot ourselves from. Look, Mandela did a great job, when he walked into a room, into a stadium, and so forth. Thabo Mbeki came in. I think he was sort of a systems man. He avoided,
the pomp and ceremony,
populist,
and all of that pageantry,
Yes, but unfortunately, we missed out on that trajectory. And I don't want to get into political analysis. I think there are people better placed to make that type of analysis. But I think we missed on that trajectory, and we kind of got whipped back into personalities and populism.
I hear you. And that's why conversations like this are important. We made a conscious decision as a team with this show that we need to start having the economic conversation. At first, people were very angry with us because we don't so much entertain the conversation that says that party is better than that party. These people are better than those people. It's an old conversation. It's taking us nowhere. And that's why we want to talk more with leaders that are building stuff, that are making things happen. Because there's a particular way of thinking. South Africa, if South Africa was a person, right? I think that we are still stuck at the moment in our teenage years. We are being confronted.
Work behind the
right. We're now confronted with the realities of adulting. And the realities of adulting are calling upon us to have a different approach and thinking and orientation to how we run things, how we administer things, how we govern things, right? We've talked about the King 1, King 2. Remember those things? And they were very far removed from the people. They made sense. I mean, if you wanted to read that stuff and get an MBA, wonderful stuff. But that stuff is still so far removed from the people who must be the ones that buy into the systems thinking. And that's why these conversations are so critically important. That's why I said, no, let's do it. Let's talk about systems. But systems need to be understood and run by people who also have a particular value system, right? Hence, your company has got a specific name, Ntiyiso, which means truth.
We stand for it.
Yeah? For truth, right? Talk to me about your relationship with truth. What is truth from your perspective?
Yeah, we stand for truth in many ways. And, one such way is, so we talk about something called the first principle problem solving approach, right? So when we approach a problem, we approach it based on the facts. Excuse me. Right.
You can't be popular.
Well, these are not big facts, It's okay. How many ratepayers are here? Right. What is the demographic of the ratepayers? Where are the tariffs? Where were they before? What is the payment rate? Right. Which channels are people using? So those are snippets of the truth. And unless you're able to curate those pieces of the truth, you will not be able to make a proper analysis that will then allow you to come up with a fit for purpose solution to a problem. So that's one level that we interact with the truth. Not in any order, but the second level is that we work in environments where we have to call certain things by name in order to make impact. We have to act with honesty, right? I mean, we do, for example, credit control. So someone come to your house and say, Mr. Masango, your account is owing and we're coming to switch off your electricity supply. How easy is it to just say, chap, here's $200,
come back another day.
Drop the switch, take a picture and put it up and go away, right? We need to avoid those kind of things because remember, concepts such as honesty, they are basically manifests of truth. You can't be honest but untruthful, right? So you can say truth is a foundation of judiciousness, of honesty, of righteousness, right? So we don't cheat our clients, for example. We will not allow our firm to get into a contract or a deal that we believe and we can see that here I'm not sure if I'm right to use this word, but we're not providing value to the client, right? So those are the many manifests of the truth.
I imagine that those kinds of values that some people may understand to be wishy-washy, sentimental, maybe even emotional, are actually very serious strategic, tactical imperatives that impact the business bottom line, right?
Absolutely. And I mean, look, I think anyone is free to do business the way they see fit, right? But these things, at some point or the other, catches up with you. So if you're building an organization that has to outlive you and the immediate, people that you work with, you got to take those kind of issues very serious. And I mean, this is true not just for a budding organization of 17 years that we are. Yeah. It's true of conglomerates. I know many of them get away with some of these things. I mean, just yesterday I was hearing someone lamenting about how one of the big firms is budgeted $1.5 billion to pay fines. And I thought, oh, what a distasteful business model.
So they factor in corruption.
Absolutely. I thought
So it becomes institutionalized.
Yes.
That's scary. It becomes systemized.
Yes, and this is an international organization, But look, it's not for us to want to copy such ways of thinking.
My mission, the reason why I'm standing here is because I truly love this country. I love the people of this country in all of their diversities. We've got issues. We've got our own issues. I truly, I'm passionate about South Africa and South Africans in all of our hues and all of our strange manifestations. It gives me great hope to know that there are people that are thinking like you and that are happy to have the conversation now. Because business leaders are shy, very, very reluctant to come and have these kinds of conversations. So I want to thank you for having agreed to do that. Mom's still alive?
Mom is still alive.
What does she think of your achievements? You should see this guy right now. I got a mama's boy in the studio. Yeah, tell me. So I'm the last born, in the family, and my father died 3 months before I was born. So I guess the relationship that I have with my mother, it's always very emotional. If we have a family party and she has to speak. Unfortunately, now she was hit by a stroke. Oh, I'm sorry.
And her speech is slightly impaired, but she can speak. Right. So she becomes very emotional, when she reflects on, what I'm able to do.
Right.
And where, we came from.
Right.
So, unfortunately, she doesn't understand English.
Is she listening now?
No, because she's in Limpopo, and I don't think they're able to.
We'll send you a podcast. You can send her the podcast.
Yeah.
So, final question for me: where to from here for Ntiyiso Consulting?
Look, we have great ambitions. We truly have great ambitions. We want to grow and become a preeminent, management consulting firm, which is homegrown. If this means anything to anyone, black.
It's very important.
Founded,
very important.
Managed, right? We want to expand into the continent of Africa because we believe that there's a lot of value that's being left on the table with especially cities. We always lament overcrowding of cities across the continent. But if you understand that the more people in the city, the more cities can...
Got you. Listen, we've run out of time.
Sorry.
I really wish we had more time. So much to talk about. Alex Mabunda, Chief Executive Officer of Ntiyiso Consulting Group. What a great conversation, and all the best for you, my brother. Thank you so much for agreeing to talk to us.